Let's talk about compliance, a big topic on the minds of advisors, compliance managers. Um, the SEC introduced a crypto custody rule last year that addresses not only custody but discretion. The simple ability to have discretion makes you subject to the rule. And among the various requirements, it determines that advisors must use qualified custodians if they want to have discretion and custody over digital assets. So when you think about self-custody, as you have no discretion, as you have no custody, how do you think about the compliance implications of a self-custody strategy or approach to digital asset advisory?
Right. So first, regardless of if we're talking a traditional finance or digital assets, anything, it comes down to client suitability and acting as a fiduciary, at least for the registered investment advisors like myself that are certified financial planners, and client suitability is definitely part of what is best for the client. So we have to make sure that is absolutely true, and taking into account other features of a client's comfort around technology, for example, their risk tolerance. Again, I kind of bring that up because those are the foundational aspects, combined with the fact of how curious a client is with new technology. I think that that's also too in terms of where they might fall on the technology adoption curve. If this is something that they're looking to do in passing and they're somewhat curious, but they're not really looking at it as a serious commitment or a focus on learning, then potentially one of those other solutions might be a better fit with the Bitcoin ETF, or where they do allow a different individual or organization to have custody and discretion, and they would have to follow the guidelines. Personally, I'm not looking for that because I think that kind of completely eliminates the power behind this new ecosystem, right? So for someone to pay me money, I mean, to just get to the very core aspects of it, is one is to help them guide into a different area, and also to help provide these best practices and kind of coach them through how to get more and more involved in technology. Now, that could be understanding what self-custody is, but in order to understand self-custody, it forces you to kind of look at cybersecurity concepts. It broadens up a lot of these other aspects that someone should be very self-aware anyways. It's good to be aware of the fact that if your private identifiable information is compromised and you have weak cybersecurity requirements, such as not having two-factor authentication or other weaker securities, then there's a risk there. And so the reason I bring this all up is even the perception of risk, just because you might be ignoring a risk doesn't mean that it's there. So I would also kind of counter this argument of saying like, oh, this is too risky for people that aren't technology savvy, when in fact, they might be adding a new risk because they're not looking at these things and they're just choose to ignore this. And so I think there's a benefit there to learning this technology. And this is what I would also say to someone that is on the fence. By going through this process, it will force you to start looking at everything from a risked approach of, oh, wow, that's something I didn't realize that could happen. Now I'm going to be more self-aware. For example, Microsoft might have a default setting of saving your files on your desktop to their cloud backup service. What if that is compromised? Now, ideally, if you're thinking that those files on your computer are just on your computer, but now they're backed up to the cloud, that's not about crypto. That's just about basic security. So that is what I'm going through in terms of the motivations behind this. I think it really is a great motivator if someone is incentivized to really learn where the world is going.
So if you're new to the world of non-custodial, non-discretionary digital asset advisory through a platform like L1, how do you talk to your compliance manager about it? Your compliance manager has probably heard a lot about the different SEC enforcement actions. And how do you bring this up and explain a product like L1 and the ability to work with clients who already hold these assets? Again, these are assets that your clients are already investing in, whether you are helping them or not. How do you talk to compliance about it?
Sure. I think there's three different approaches you can take, and I'll talk about each one. So at a very high level, the first approach is bottom up approach. Walk depending on the type of personality of your compliance officer and the overall kind of how they think, right? So if they're more of I want to understand how this actually works, then walk them through it. Make them maybe that this is a time where you do use that magic link and you send them an email and you walk them through the actual process of this is exactly how this works. So that's a bottom up approach. And then you could take the comparison approach. And the comparison approach is kind of meet them with something that they might have understood or kind of more of an awareness with, and then understand and explain the differences. So for example, with 401k plans, certain RIAs have permission to use a platform called Pantera. Well, Pantera is a way to facilitate the advisors being able to manage the assets through the Pantera platform of clients that have existing 401k, 403bs. The difference being, and major difference, is you have discretion, and two, there is still the client still has to provide the login information through a facilitation through Pantera. So it's like a blind kind of login, if you will. The advisor doesn't have any access, they can't do anything, but Pantera is facilitating through their technology that sharing. Well, that to me is two major pluses for L1 advisors right away. One, you're not sharing any client login information. There's never any need to ever get any way that you would allow or facilitate the client's kind of provisioning. Because again, the client's logging in either through one of those options, Magic Link, which is through their email, or through their own self-custodied private keys, either on MetaMask, Coinbase wallet, or the hardware wallet. So the reason you don't need any of that is the fact that all this information is available publicly. Once you have the client's publicly available address, then it's just a question of sending them those transactions and seeing what already exists on chain. So you don't even need any type of access provisioning there at all. And the second thing is you can't do anything unless they approve it. So you're guaranteed to not be able to have discretion because you really can't do anything. If someone came to me and said, I want you to do this transaction, great. The most I could do is send the actual transaction recommendation, but then it goes through the system. It gets validated to make sure that it's something that can actually happen in terms of a random transaction to send something from Ethereum to Bitcoin, for example. So there's filters there. And then there's security protocols that L1 uses. And so once you get through all that, then it finally gets to the client getting that recommendation that's been kind of monitored, filtered, and all that. And it's up to them to actually click the button to approve it, if they do at all. And they can easily reject it, or the advisor's like, we're not going to do that anymore because too much time has gone by. So I think the real risk then with the compliance is just ensuring you have the right language in your Form ADV of understanding that this is a non-discretionary transaction, that it is up to the client to approve it, which means that at that time, the prices could change. And so I think there is more of, again, disclosure, having the client aware of how this works and how this operates, and having the proper kind of awareness. But that I think is more the conversation that I would have with the compliance officer. And then the final way is just taking more of a top-down approach of kind of showing them, here's other firms that are using this. This is how they're using it. This is the information that is available. These are exactly all the references that the SEC is providing. This is why it does not apply. And then other provisionings in terms of cybersecurity are things that the firm should be following anyways. And so I think it can bolt on to a lot of the existing kind of framework of a lot of different firms, with the understanding of just making sure that you have the right proper disclosures with dealing with digital assets, with working with non-discretionary accounts.